The wind whispered through the dense pine trees, brushing the edge of the valley like a ghost searching for something lost. In the fading blue of twilight, Cole Dawson tightened the latch on the old barn door, the metal creaking under his calloused hands. He gave a final pat to his horse, Jasper, who snorted softly and lowered his head into the water trough. Out here, on the far reaches of Maple Ridge, quiet was sacred. Cole had lived alone on this land for nearly 6 years, ever since the accident that took his younger brother and made silence a permanent tenant in his heart. The cabin, the barn, the fields, all of it kept him breathing, kept him from drowning in grief. But tonight, the silence cracked. A scream tore through the air like lightning splitting a dead tree, high-pitched, sharp, and unmistakably human. Cole froze. The brush in his hand slipped into the dirt. He turned his head slowly, as if the sound might vanish if he moved too quickly. But then it came again, fainter but clearer now. "Help me! Please! Someone!" His heart slammed against his ribs as adrenaline surged through his veins. Without hesitation, he snatched the flashlight from the barn wall, clipped it to his belt, and ran. The dry earth crunched beneath his boots as he sprinted through the darkening woods. It had come from the South Ridge, the place where the mountain's edge dropped into a near-vertical canyon. Locals called it Devil's Hollow, but to Cole it was just a boundary. A line never meant to be crossed. Tonight, someone had. Hails. The trees thinned out as he approached the cliff's edge. Moonlight filtered through the pine needles, casting fractured shadows across the ground. The wind picked up, whistling through the canyon like a warning. "Hello?" he called out, voice firm, trying to cut through the wind. "Where are you?" For a moment, only silence answered. Then, "I'm here." "Oh God, please, I can't hold on much longer." His eyes scanned the jagged edge of the cliff until he spotted her. A figure in white, clinging to the lowest limb of a twisted oak that jutted out over the abyss. Her legs dangled into open air, one shoe missing, her hands wrapped around the thick branch in a death grip. She was maybe 15 feet below the ledge, suspended above a fall that would kill her instantly. Cole dropped to his stomach and crawled to the edge. "Don't look down," he said calmly. "Look at me." The woman lifted her face. In the dim light, her features were pale and wild, framed by dark hair matted to her cheeks. Her lips were trembling, and her wide hazel eyes locked onto his like he was the last solid thing in the world. "I slipped," she choked out. "I was running and I didn't see." "Hold on," he said. "I'm gonna get you out of there." He pulled the coiled rope from his belt, used mostly for hauling feed or climbing trees for repairs, and anchored it to a root near the cliffside. Then, testing the knot with a swift tug, he looped it around his waist and lowered himself slowly, inch by inch, toward her. "Don't move," he warned. "Just hang tight." She nodded, her arms trembling violently now. When he finally reached her, his feet found purchase on a narrow outcrop. He could see her fingers slipping. "I'm going to grab you," he said. "When I do, let go of the branch and trust me." She stared at him, panicked. I can't." "You can," he said gently. "I've got you. I swear." With one arm wrapped around the trunk and the other reaching, he locked his fingers around her wrist. Now, she let go. For a single, heart-stopping second, her body dropped, and then he yanked her upward with everything he had. His muscles screamed as he pressed her against his chest, bracing her with his legs and arms until they both clung to the ledge. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Her heart thundered against his. His breath came in heavy gasps. "I've got you," he whispered again. They climbed the rope together, slowly, inch by inch, until they rolled onto solid ground at the top of the ridge. The woman collapsed beside him, sobbing, her face buried in the grass. Cole lay on his back, staring up at the night sky, pulse still racing. He turned to her. "What the hell were you doing out here?" She sat up slowly, wiping tears and dirt from her cheeks. Her dress, once elegant, was torn at the hem, stained with mud and pine sap. "I was running," she said. "From my wedding." Cole blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "My name's Ava Kingsley," she said shakily. "My father is Richard Kingsley. He owns half the banks in the city. And was supposed to marry a man I barely knew." A deal. A contract in the shape of a ceremony. Cole's brow furrowed. He'd heard of the Kingsley Empire. Almost everyone had. But why would a billionaire heiress be dangling from a tree over Devil's Hollow? I ran, she said. They're going to kill me for it. She looked up at him then, her eyes no longer wild, but terrified. You weren't supposed to find me, but I'm glad you did. Cole didn't know what to say. He just nodded and stood, offering her a hand. Let's get you out of here. Cole led Ava through the darkened woods in silence, flashlight beam cutting a path between the gnarled trunks. She walked barefoot now. Her remaining shoe had slipped off during the climb, and though her steps were uneven, she didn't complain. She just followed, like someone who'd run too far to care about the pain anymore. His cabin emerged at the edge of a clearing, a modest, single-story structure built of weathered timber, with smoke curling faintly from the chimney. A wind chime made of old keys and bones clicked softly in the breeze, the only sound besides the crickets and Ava's shallow breathing. Here, he said, pushing the door open. Watch your step. The inside was warm and rustic. A wood-burning stove flickered in the corner, casting amber light across rough-hewn furniture and books piled in careless stacks. A simple cot lined one wall, opposite a battered sofa. There was no TV, no internet router blinking in a corner. Just quiet. Earthy. Grounded. Ava stepped in slowly, her eyes scanning every detail like it might vanish at any moment. You live here? Alone? Cole gave a small shrug. I do now. He fetched a clean towel from a drawer and a pair of wool socks from a basket. Sit, he said, pointing to the sofa. She obeyed, her fingers running over the armrest as if it were some kind of artifact. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, a streak of blood drying along her ankle where the branch had scraped her. I'm not hurt bad, she said quickly, catching his glance. Just bruised. Maybe a little embarrassed. He gave her a look. You almost died hanging off a tree branch. I think we're past embarrassment. Ava let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Cole disappeared into the small bathroom and returned with a tin of ointment and a damp cloth. This might sting. She winced, but said nothing as he gently dabbed the cut. The cabin was so quiet that the sound of cloth against skin felt louder than words. I never thought I'd make it out, she murmured, eyes fixed on the flickering fire. The car broke down. I tried to get to the ranger station, but I must have gone the wrong way. The moment I stepped near the ridge, I slipped. It was just there, the cliff. And whoever you're running from? Cole asked without looking up. Ava hesitated. They'll come, she said softly. Maybe not tonight. But they will. He nodded slowly, then stood. You can stay here for the night. Rest. Tomorrow we figure out the next step. Ava looked up at him, unsure. Why are you helping me? Cole paused. The shadows danced across his face. Because I've been the one screaming into the dark before, he said. And nobody came. That night, Ava slept on the cot, wrapped in a borrowed flannel shirt and a wool blanket. Cole stayed by the fire, occasionally glancing toward her silhouette in the dim light. She didn't stir much, her body too exhausted, her mind likely racing beneath the surface. He didn't ask for more details. Not yet. But deep down, he knew what kind of men sent girls like her running into the woods. Men who thought their money could shape the world. That they could own people like they owned stocks and land. He'd worked in the city once, briefly, long enough to see the way the powerful walked like gravity bent around them. He'd left it all behind. Now, trouble had walked into his woods with bare feet and broken trust. And somehow, it didn't feel like an accident. Monta. The next morning, the world was quiet again. Sunlight filtered through the pines and painted the cabin floor in soft gold. Birds chirped on the roof. Ava stood outside on the porch, wearing a pair of Cole's spare boots, comically large on her, and holding a chipped mug of tea with both hands. She looked different in daylight. Still fragile, but clearer. Awake. He joined her, leaning against the rail. Feel like telling me more? He asked. Ava nodded. Her voice was steady now. "My name is Ava Kingsley," she said, "daughter of Richard Kingsley, CEO of Kingsley Financial. Last night was supposed to be my wedding." Cole stayed silent. "I never chose it," she went on. "My father arranged it with Victor Langdon. He's older, dangerous, but rich. Their merger depended on this marriage. I was the gift." She swallowed. "But I ran, right before the vows. I left my phone, ditched the guards. I thought I was clever. But Victor doesn't take no for an answer. And when he realized I wasn't going to play nice, he sent someone after me. Not just to bring me back, to make sure I never embarrassed him again." Cole's fingers curled around the railing. "You think they're still looking?" Ava nodded. "I'm sure of it." He watched the forest in silence, eyes narrowing. "You're not going back," he said finally. Ava turned to look at him. "Then what do I do?" He glanced at her, really looked at her. "You learn how to survive," he said. "And we make sure they never find you." Days passed like pages turning gently in a book neither of them had planned to read. Ava stayed. At first, it was just about healing. Her twisted ankle, the bruises on her palms, the gash across her shin. But as her body recovered, so did something deeper. Her breath, her steadiness, her sense of self. She began helping around the cabin. She washed dishes, tended to the herb garden behind the shed, and even learned how to chop wood, though she winced every time a splinter found her soft hands. Cole said little, but watched everything. And slowly, Ava noticed how he moved through the world, like a man who once loved noise, but had learned to live in silence. In the mornings, he'd boil coffee over the stove and leave her the first cup without a word. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, sometimes in silence, sometimes in low conversation. She told him about the books she used to sneak out from her father's library, how she dreamed once of becoming a landscape artist, how she hated high heels but wore them anyway to make her mother happy. Cole didn't talk much about his past, but Ava learned bits through observation. A photograph of a boy on a dusty shelf, a baseball glove hanging by the door, never touched. A room with the door always shut. On the fifth night, as they ate a stew Ava had managed to cook, burned slightly but edible, she asked gently, "Why did you leave the city?" He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "Too much noise, too many ghosts." She didn't push. She understood. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She stood by the small kitchen window staring at the black outlines of the trees. Something was shifting in her. She had spent years walking on marble floors and pretending to be something golden. Here, in this splintered, dusty cabin with dirt under her nails and the scent of pine in her clothes, she felt real. She didn't know she'd fallen asleep by the fire until Cole gently shook her awake just before dawn. His voice was low, steady. "Ava, come see this." She blinked, sitting upright, still groggy. "What's wrong?" He handed her his flashlight, already dressed and wearing his boots. "Something you need to see." Outside, the morning mist clung to the ground like smoke. The woods were still asleep, save for the wind in the upper branches. Cole led her past the chicken coop, around the back of the shed, and stopped. There, pressed into the damp earth, were footprints. Heavy, male, not his. They circled near the firewood pile. Too close to the cabin, too deliberate. Ava's breath hitched. "Could be a hiker," she offered weakly. Cole shook his head. "Not this deep. And not in the middle of the night." He crouched to study them, jaw tense. They knew to avoid the path. That means they've been watching. Ava's skin went cold despite the rising sun. "You think it's Langdon's men?" "I think someone's testing the waters," Cole said grimly, "seeing if it's worth coming closer." He stood and faced her. "It's time we stopped waiting." That afternoon, Cole made a call to someone Ava hadn't expected. Marla Chen, a former lawyer from his old life, now working pro bono cases in the city. He kept the conversation brief but firm. "I've got someone who needs protection, Marla, off the books, for now." And then came the second call to a journalist. A man named David Tran, who owed Cole a favor. Big enough to get a story rolling, big enough to make noise if they needed it. Morchits. Ava listened from the porch, her heart pounding. "I don't want to run anymore," she whispered later, as they chopped wood together. "Good," Cole said, handing her another log. "Then let's give them something to be afraid of." That evening she sat on the porch swing while Cole worked on setting up trail cameras in the woods. She looked out at the vast, unknowable forest and realized she wasn't scared the way she used to be. Fear still sat somewhere inside her, but now it had shape. Now it had a name. Victor Langdon, and she was done letting him write her story. But in the woods, just beyond the line where the cabin lights faded, someone was watching. A black-gloved hand adjusted binoculars. A voice crackled quietly through a hidden earpiece. "She's here!" They staged it carefully. David Tran, the journalist, leaked an anonymous tip to Langdon's inner circle. Ava Kingsley seen alive near Redwood County. A woman matching her description checked into Ironwood Motel under a fake name. Langdon took the bait. Within 24 hours, a black SUV was spotted crossing the Old Canyon Bridge. Ava waited in room 6. She wore the same white dress from the day of her wedding, the hem cleaned and sewn where it had torn. A symbol, a weapon. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and beneath her neckline, the tiny microphone lay flat against her skin. She paced the room while Marla and Cole watched from the adjacent room through a cracked wall vent. Outside, 2 officers from the local sheriff's department waited in unmarked cars. Ready, but discreet, Marla had convinced them with every legal lever she had left. It was just after midnight when the door creaked open. Who? Victor Langdon entered like he owned the building. Who? He was taller than Ava remembered, slim, sharp suit, and an expression of disgust barely hidden behind charm. He shut the door gently, as if stepping into a boardroom. "My darling," he said, voice like oil on water, "you've caused quite the mess." Ava stood by the window, back straight. "Don't call me that," Victor chuckled. Still dramatic. "Even now." He stepped closer, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've cost your father? The merger is ruined. The headlines are everywhere. I had to pay off 2 journalists and 3 members of the board just to keep the company afloat. And for what? So you could go play house with a man who chops wood for a living?" Ava didn't move. "I'd rather split logs in the rain than share a penthouse with a monster." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You think this ends with you surviving, Ava? You think I'll let you walk away from this?" "I'm not walking," she said, and finally turned to face him. "I'm watching." She glanced once, just once, at the button sewn onto her dress. Victor followed her gaze. And in that moment, realization dawned. His voice dropped. "You're recording me." Ava tilted her head. "Yes, I am." And then, before he could react, the motel door burst open. Cole stormed in first, followed by 2 officers with weapons drawn. "Victor Langdon, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, blackmail, and attempted unlawful detainment," one of the officers declared. Victor's face twisted. Not in rage, but disbelief. "This is a mistake," he hissed. "You don't know who I am." Cole stepped forward, jaw clenched. "We know exactly who you are." They cuffed him, read his rights, and let him out under flickering motel lights. Marla exhaled slowly from the next room. "And that," she said, "is how you end a man who thought he was untouchable." The news broke within hours. Billionaire heir arrested in plot to silence bride. Victor Langdon caught on tape threatening Ava Kingsley. Hidden power plays behind Kingsley-Langdon merger revealed. Other women came forward. Former assistants, ex-fiancés, silenced victims. The momentum couldn't be stopped. Ava, however, chose silence. She refused interviews. She didn't want fame. What she wanted was peace, and for the first time in her life, she had earned it. Weeks later, back in the forested quiet of Maple Ridge, Cole repaired the railing on the porch, while Ava watered the herb garden. Marla had helped her change her name, scrub her identity from public databases, and start fresh. But one thing remained the same. Ava Kingsley was no longer someone's pawn. She was her own name now, her own voice. Day. And she chose to stay. Day. Days. Day. Ites public punchers. With the cabin. With the trees that whispered of storms weathered and survived. Spring arrived slowly in Maple Ridge, brushing the treetops with hints of green and dusting the forest floor with wildflowers. The cold was gone, the threat had passed, and in its place was something neither Cole nor Ava had expected to find again: peace. Cole rebuilt the wooden fence along the southern ridge, right at the spot where he had first seen Ava clinging to that oak branch, trembling and silent above the void. Now the area was different. The old cliff's edge had been reinforced with hand-carved rails, and a bench faced westward, where the sun dipped each evening in a flood of gold and soft orange. They called it the edge of everything, because it was the place where one life almost ended, and another began. Ava sat on that bench every morning with a sketchbook in her lap. She was painting again, quiet, beautiful landscapes filled with pine trees and wild deer and wooden cabins with glowing windows. Her hands were steadier now. Her smile was easier. And Cole? He never stopped watching her. Not to guard, just to admire. The wedding was her idea. Nothing big, she told him one morning, fingers entwined with his over a chipped coffee mug. No gowns or photographers. Just us. And this place. He didn't hesitate. Whatever you want. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in early May. The sun was generous. The trees wore white blossoms like lace. Wildflowers bloomed like scattered confetti across the grass near the ridge. Ava wore a dress she had made herself. Soft ivory fabric stitched together from bits of her past life. A silk sleeve from her childhood recital dress. Lace from her mother's handkerchief. A ribbon she once wore to art school before she had been told to forget those dreams. Cole wore a clean white shirt and the dark blazer he hadn't touched since his brother's funeral. This time, it didn't feel heavy. Only 3 people stood with them. Marla Chen, smiling proudly, holding the papers. David Tran, camera slung over his shoulder, not for headlines, just memories. And Lily. Ava had found her 3 months earlier at a shelter in the city. A quiet girl with sad eyes and a name tag that simply said, Lily, age 6. She had lost both parents in a car accident, no relatives, no home. Balbal. Ava didn't hesitate. I don't want her to be invisible, she had whispered to Cole the day they brought her to the cabin. Now Lily stood between them, wearing a yellow sundress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. She beamed as Ava kissed her forehead before turning to Cole. The ceremony was short, but every word mattered. When Ava said, "You saved me," her voice trembled, not from fear, but from knowing it was true. And when Cole said, "You brought me back," he looked not just at her, but at Lily too. They didn't promise forever. They promised today and tomorrow, and every morning they could wake up and see the sun through the trees. Later that evening, after the guests had gone, the 3 of them sat on the bench at the edge of the ridge. Lily curled between them, dozing off as the sky turned from gold to violet. Ava rested her head on Cole's shoulder. I used to think the world ended here, she whispered. Cole looked out over the vast open land, the wind tugging gently at the wildflowers. It did, he said, and then it began again. They stayed there long after the stars had bloomed overhead. Not fugitives, not broken people trying to escape. Just a family, rooted like trees in a place that had nearly swallowed them whole. But now, it was home. 3 days later, they had a plan. Set all. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't safe, but it was theirs. Twa. Marla Chen arrived in an old pickup truck, dressed like a weekend hiker. But beneath her wool jacket was a sharp mind and a loaded briefcase filled with everything they needed. Burner phones, court affidavits, and a miniature recording device the size of a coat button. Victor Langdon has made a lot of enemies, she said as she shook Ava's hand, but very few had the guts, or proof, to take him down. Until now. Ava's grip trembled only slightly. Cole explained the rest over the cabin's worn kitchen table, a hand-drawn map spread out between them. This, he pointed, is the Ironwood Motel. Old, half-condemned, and off the main highway. It still has power, still has cameras. Most people think it's abandoned. Langdon's men will follow her there, Marla said, nodding. It's bait. And if they're half as arrogant as I remember, Cole added, he'll come in person. Ava took a slow breath. What happens when he does? Marla gave her a firm look. That's your part. They staged it carefully. David Tran, the journalist, leaked an anonymous tip to Langdon's inner circle. Ava Kingsley seen alive near Redwood County. A woman matching her description checked into Ironwood Motel under a fake name. Langdon took the bait. Within 24 hours, a black SUV was spotted crossing the Old Canyon Bridge. Ava waited in room 6. She wore the same white dress from the day of her wedding, the hem cleaned and sewn where it had torn, a symbol, a weapon. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and beneath her neckline, the tiny microphone lay flat against her skin. She paced the room while Marla and Cole watched from the adjacent room through a cracked wall vent. Outside, 2 officers from the local sheriff's department waited in unmarked cars, ready but discreet. Marla had convinced them with every legal lever she had left. It was just after midnight when the door creaked open. Cree. Victor Langdon entered like he owned the building. Cree. He was taller than Ava remembered, slim, sharp suit, and an expression of disgust barely hidden behind charm. He shut the door gently, as if stepping into a boardroom. "My darling," he said, voice like oil on water. "You've caused quite the mess." Ava stood by the window, back straight. "Don't call me that," Victor chuckled. "Still dramatic." "Even now." He stepped closer, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Do you have any idea what you've cost your father? The merger is ruined. The headlines are everywhere. I had to pay off 2 journalists and 3 members of the board just to keep the company afloat." "And for what? So you could go play house with a man who chops wood for a living?" Ava didn't move. "I'd rather split logs in the rain than share a penthouse with a monster." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You think this ends with you surviving, Ava? You think I'll let you walk away from this?" "I'm not walking," she said, and finally turned to face him. "I'm watching." She glanced once, just once, at the button sewn onto her dress. Victor followed her gaze, and in that moment, realization dawned. His voice dropped. "You're recording me." Ava tilted her head. "Yes, I am." And then, before he could react, the motel door burst open. Cole stormed in first, followed by 2 officers with weapons drawn. "Victor Langdon, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, blackmail, and attempted unlawful detainment," one of the officers declared. Victor's face twisted, not in rage, but disbelief. "This is a mistake," he hissed. "You don't know who I am." Cole stepped forward, jaw clenched. "We know exactly who you are." They cuffed him, read his rights, and let him out under flickering motel lights. Marla exhaled slowly from the next room. "And that," she said, "is how you end a man who thought he was untouchable." If this story moved you, reminded you that healing is real, or renewed your belief in second chances, we invite you to subscribe to Healing Stories. Here, we share real-life journeys of strength, love, and hope. Stories that speak straight to the soul. Thank you for being here. And always remember, no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back to the light. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let us know.